What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about who killed who in Scream 6. This is going to contain major spoilers, obviously, and we're going to break down all of the four killers in this film. They went for it, they did it, and what we're going to be looking at here is for technique in terms of how they used the knife, their kind of stabbing techniques, also alibis, also, I guess, trusting them in what they said to us in the films. I really do believe I'm going to get this right. My wife and I collaborated for several hours trying to get this list just right. You can, of course, let me know in the comments who you think killed each person or attack. We're going to go over each attack as well in this film. So let's start at the beginning, the easiest to see because they literally take off their own mask, and again, they went for it in the opening, is Jason, right? So Jason is the one who kills Laura. So there you go, you got your first kill. Pretty darn simple. He reveals himself. He goes back into his apartment. Next up is him and his partner, Greg, right? And they had their own thing they were going to do throughout the movie, and then they were stopped right at the beginning because obviously we know Detective Bailey and the group, they wanted to stop their plans so they could kill Sam and Tara on their own. So here's what happened here. I'm going to say Greg, who was completely cut up, right, put in the fridge, I'm going to say that was Detective Bailey. I really don't see how it could have been either of the other two. Now, they do have alibis, which I'm going to talk about in a second for Jason's part. But for Greg, technically, you could have done that at any time. I'm just going to assume, considering you were completely cut up, right, all these different body parts, stuck in a fridge, all of that, I think a cop would be the only one of the three killers that, we're going to go forward in the movie with. It's the only one that could have done it. So I think it was Detective Bailey. As for who killed Jason, I do think it's the exact same thing. Part of the reason I'm going to say is actually the phone call. The phone call is really interesting, and the phone call is really Detective Bailey. I don't know if he's trying to find stuff out. He's testing Jason, right, in terms of like, hey, what do you do? Why'd you kill people? Like, what's this all about? And ultimately, Detective Bailey is the one that tells us at the end that they had to kill those two students, those like wannabe killers, because they wanted to kill Sam and Tara first. He's the leader. Again, I think he's the one who did Greg. It makes sense that he would call Jason. He knows the information that he's supposed to be pretending to be his partner, right? And I mentioned the alibis of Quinn and Ethan. So Quinn was actually with her boyfriend, and Ethan was at the party. A thing that's important for this entire Jason thing is to remember where Jason came from, right? So he kills his teacher. He's walking back to his apartment, and he stumbles on Tara, who passes him, and she's going to the party, see you there, all that stuff. So Ethan, we know, is with Chad, all dressed up, hitting on girls. We know he was there. Quinn was with her boyfriend, and Sam's told this when she goes into the apartment, and Quinn, reveals that she went to the party. Tara went to the party. So they're both clean. Next up, we have the Bodega attack. Now, I again think this is Detective Bailey for a couple different reasons. Number one, alibis. I think that's probably the killer in this entire attack sequence. So Sam and Tara leave the apartment, right? In fact, they get a call from Detective Bailey telling them to come down to the police station because of the planted evidence against Sam. Now, what makes it tough for Detective Bailey is he's at Jason's apartment, but there's no real sense of where Jason lives as compared to Sam, Tara, Chad, literally all of them, right, in kind of like one general location. We don't know how close it is, but you can imagine, considering they all go to school, except for Sam, that they're going to live in the same general area. Detective Bailey was the one who literally got them to go outside. So I think his motivation to get them to go from point A to point B is a huge one. But on the other side of things, you have Quinn and Ethan, who are still upstairs. So they're, they see the news report. They get the call from, Quinn gets the call from her dad. She hands the phone off. So Quinn, Ethan, Annika, Mindy, and Chad are all still upstairs. I imagine if Ethan or Quinn was the one who attacked Tara right before they ran and they went to the convenience store, right? If that was either of them, Chad or Mindy, they would have said something later on. Ethan was already sketchy. Chad was already, actually both of them were already very much suspecting Ethan. I think they would have said, hey, you left when Sam and Tara left. Where'd you go? I think that would have been brought up. So I think actually they're kind of completely out. But then one final, I'd say maybe cherry on top, is the gun work, right? I had predicted this actually from the trailer, the whole I'm something different, right? This Ghostface killer, although not really too different in the movie, this Ghostface killer, this specific one in the bodega, clearly knew what they were doing, right? They were able to disarm somebody with a shotgun. I don't think Ethan or Quinn would have been able to do that. I don't think strength matters, because we're going to talk about strength as this video goes on, but I do think the hand-to-hand, awareness was something that Detective Bailey would have had, and it made the most sense for it to be him. And one final thing is actually the phone call that they get right before Tara is attacked and they run for it. Basically, it's an explanation of what's happened so far, right? Jason and Greg, they killed them because Jason and Greg were going to kill Sam and Tara, but also you hear the word punish. Ghostface says, like, I'm here to punish you, and anybody who stands between us, like, I'm going to take them out as well. Well, what does Detective Bailey say at the end of the movie during the monologue? He also says, we have to punish you, or we're going to punish you, but he says the word punish. So I think the way they talk, I think the theme of what he's telling Sam in that moment matches what he tells her at the end, so I do believe it's him. Then we get to Sam's therapist, who was Stone, right? And he was in it for only 2 scenes, but I think, again, this is Detective Bailey. I believe, if I'm thinking about this right, this is the last thing Detective Bailey does in terms of murder. The rest, he covers things up, but this is where he gets his hands dirty. The reason I'm going to say this, there is, I would say, a coin flip, or like a three-sided coin, if you will. It could be anybody, I suppose, okay? The style of kill isn't really all that important. They do have different styles. I'll talk about Quinn and Ethan's as this video goes on, but I'm going to give it Detective Bailey for 2 simple reasons. Number 1, Sam literally tells him, hey, do you have an alibi? He asks them. And she says, I was with my therapist. I'll give you his information. You can contact him. I'll be in the clear. Sam literally tells him that. And then the next day, or whenever the time, kind of skip is, he's murdered. So I think Detective Bailey would be the one to do it. The files are stolen, right? So Detective Bailey would most likely do that. But the second part that I do think gives it away is he was bragging about it. I believe he was bragging about it to Kirby. The whole theme afterwards is, he puts the papers on the table and says, hey, her therapist was killed, stabbed through the nose. Through the nose, can you believe it? And he's trying to, like, gross Kirby out. And then he's trying to plant the seeds, and Kirby even calls him on it. Kirby's like, well, so Sam killed her therapist and stole her own notes to, like, make sure that we couldn't find. Like, does that make any sense? And then he kind of says, well, maybe she did. So I think he was trying to maybe test Kirby, see if he could get Kirby onto his side and believe that that was even a possibility. It wasn't, like, too believable at all, but I think that kind of gives it away that I think he was gloating about the kill. First, like the nose thing, I think he was gloating about that. And I think leading Kirby on, I think that was part of the plan that failed at that moment at least, but I think that was part of the plan. So I'm going to give it to him. Okay, now we have to talk about Annika, but before that, I guess Quinn, who doesn't really count, but her boyfriend. Let's not forget Quinn's boyfriend, because it is a murder in this movie and you need to count it and you need to say who did it. I think it's Ethan. For the simple fact that Quinn is laying in her bed talking to her boyfriend in the bathroom, and you see Ghostface, Ghostface goes in there and wrecks him up, and obviously Quinn just stays very silent and doesn't care during that sequence. Obviously, Quinn being attacked has to be Ethan. Quinn's thrown on Annika, and that is all Ethan, afterwards. Here's the thing I'd like to throw in there, though, in terms of technique. I think this is the first time that we start to see a quote-unquote technique from the killer. It seems to me that Ethan likes side stabs / like dragging things up, because it's a reoccurring theme as this, even from characters that make it. It's a reoccurring theme. So you see Ethan stab Annika and then pulls it up, and you're going to see that, or at least the idea that he likes to stab. No, I guess he stabs her directly in the center, but you see him stab Tara roughly the same place. You see him stab Kirby roughly the same place. So I think that's his kind of style. Then we have the Gale attack, and the Gale attack was pretty darn easy, because this is one of those things you just have to trust, right? Quinn literally says at the end that she went to Gale, so you have to believe her. Even if you don't want to believe her, one interesting thing that I found, right, if she didn't say that, I do believe they mimic their stabbing technique off of the masks that they're wearing, at least the final masks, right? So it's hard to care about or to look too much into the masks throughout the movie, like the first half or so, because they're killing or they're attacking and they're leaving the mask at the crime scene. So they're literally giving that mask up. And so they're wearing masks from like Roman to Charlie and all this stuff that doesn't necessarily matter. But then once you get to the end, obviously, right? But here's the important thing. So Ethan is wearing, Debbie Salt, Nancy Loomis's mask. You have Quinn wearing Stu's mask, and then you have Detective Bailey with Billy's mask. So the stabbing techniques, I don't know how much I read into it with Ethan, but I would like to read into it with Quinn at least a little, because if you watch the Gale attack, she puts the knife above her head with both of her hands and grabs onto it. It's the exact same attack style that Stu used on Sydney in the first movie, right? When Sydney kicks him and then she runs up the stairs, it was the same thing. And that was it's become, right, an iconic thing that Ghostface will do, that over the head kind of both hand thing. That's really a Stu thing. So even if Quinn didn't say that was her at Gale, I think you could still read into it, because that does happen in the Gale attack, and that was Quinn. So the Mindy attack is next, and again, I'm going to say that one is Quinn as well. Couple different reasons. Well, the biggest one, she again admits it at the end when she says Gale. She also says Mindy. So again, do you trust her at her word? I think you kind of have to. So she attacks Mindy, and then also Ethan was there just kind of watching. Can I throw this in? I know this is a Who Killed Who video. That entire scene doesn't make almost any sense whatsoever. It makes sense from us as an audience to watch, but in the movie, there's no reason to make Ethan in that scene look guilty or innocent. It doesn't matter. But because we need to see what happens to Mindy, you have to make Ethan in the clear. So Mindy should have died there. I'm just going to throw that in as like a side thing. But obviously it wasn't Ethan. Ethan was watching her. It was to give Ethan an alibi, even though you should have just killed Mindy, and then it wouldn't have mattered, because it literally wouldn't have mattered. So just throwing that in there. Then we have the Chad and Tara attack. So yes, this is an attack, and this one I do think is a little complicated. I'm just going to declare who I think, and you can again let me know in the comments. I think it's Quinn, the first one that attacks. Okay, the first one that attacks stabs Tara in the shoulder, and then, they run for it, and then everything kind of goes nuts after that. I do think that's Quinn. I think it's Quinn probably for the simple reason that she would have been the first one there. Quinn gets out after she stabs Mindy. She has a faster start. Now, it's not an incredible head start, but she does have one, right? Because Ethan has to go to Mindy, has to get her out. Paramedics have to come. They talk a little bit. And who knows how long Ethan is there before he books it. I assume it's pretty quickly afterwards, but there's a little bit of time. So the first person that's going to be able to get to the theater is actually Detective Bailey, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because he's done with the Ghostface part of his entire thing. So I do think it's Quinn. So Quinn's the one who chases them, gets the chainsaw, like all that stuff I do think is Quinn. And then Ethan is the one that kind of swoops in and does the double team, which means technically he's the one that stabs Chad. The first stab that like shocks him, gets him off guard, and they attack him. That was that. And then afterwards, I think who killed who in this movie. One thing that I thought would matter more, and it actually doesn't matter at all, is which hand. So they actually are both right-handed, but what's funny is at the end, when they're stabbing Chad, I think for the frame, for the camera, they actually I think it's maybe Quinn. Actually, it is Quinn. She switches hands. So she's using her left hand to stab. And then when they go back to back with Sam and Tara back to back and the Ghostface killers are there, Ethan, I believe, is the one who, shakes it back and forth with his right hand, and Quinn points the knife at them, and it's her left hand. So for one brief, or I guess 2 scenes, they switched the hand of the killer, but that's never done in any of the other parts of the film. So I thought I could kind of look back and figure it out, but it actually doesn't matter. And the masks, again, are hard to read too, because they have their final masks for like the end, but they're using other people's masks in the beginning and leaving them, so it's hard to read into. But there you go. There's every attack, every kill in this movie. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on. Lots of Scream content still to come.